I'm very happy to see all of you. GIZ is, for those of you who don't know, a German government-owned organization with the purpose of supporting the German government in its international cooperation for sustainable development. German government is here with BMZ. Also welcome to you. And we are in Brussels since more than 30 years now. Why? Because we early on believed that it makes a lot of sense if we try to combine different initiatives of donors and partners in our international cooperation efforts. And for that also we founded the GIZ representation as a space to bring people together, to support and facilitate dialogue. And it's great to see all of you here, such a full house, also the colleagues online. I hear this is also streamed live. And we're here for the accelerator sessions of the World Circular Economy Forum. And it's really great to see so many colleagues also in the room, also different projects combining their different topics and stakeholders and bringing them together here to seek new opportunities for collaboration and driving the topic forward. I'm coming from Bangkok. Landed Monday, left on Sunday. I'm still adjusting a little bit to Brussels spring, or what feels like winter. So it's good to see also a couple of colleagues from the region in the room. I hope you're feeling me. I'm feeling you for sure when it comes to adjusting to the climate. I wish you all a really wonderful, inspirational, accelerating session today. Enjoy the conversations. Without further ado, I hand over to you for the moderation and then to BMZ for officially opening the program. Thank you very much and welcome to GIZ Representation Brussels.
Thank you, Mr. Elgas, and a warm welcome also from my side to this accelerator session, Accelerating Extended Producer Responsibility Systems Worldwide as part of the World Circular Economy Forum. I'm Angelina Schreiner from the Prevent Waste Alliance.
And I'm Valerie Boyton from the Ellen MacArthur Foundation, and we are your moderators for today's event.
And this session is hosted by the Global Action Partnership for Extended Producer Responsibility, the GAP for EPR. And after the official welcome, you will learn more about the GAP for EPR, its activities, and we will jointly launch the policy paper that was developed in the framework of the GAP for EPR. Then in a panel discussion, we will hear perspectives from Indonesia, Colombia, Belgium, and the EU on implementing EPR systems and their contribution to a circular economy. We will then end with some closing remarks, with some future-looking closing remarks, and yeah, that's the plan for today.
Perfect. We do want to create some space for you all in this room to participate as well. We'll have some time for Q&A, as you can see here on the agenda, so we'll go around the room and collect your questions. We also would like to ask for your views in a different way. While you took your seat, you may have noticed there are cards on your chairs, red ones and green ones. If you could take those out, please. Perfect, then we'll start with a bit of a voting exercise. We have a question for you. If your answer is negative, please raise your red card. If your answer is positive, yes, please raise your green card. And our question is, and you'll see it on the screen, is EPR already implemented in your country?
Oh, wow. Many green cards here, but also some red ones. Okay, nice. Nice mixture.
Perfect. I hope that was an easy one. Second question is a bit more... Okay.
Yeah.
We fully understand it depends on what EPR is and how you define it, but we just wanted to have a quick sense of whether you think it is implemented. This may be a bit more tricky. Is EPR, in your view, a success story? Cards, please.
Okay. Again, mixed, but also many green cards. Very nice.
Very interesting. We will come back to this question in the panel, so stay tuned for that.
And we've already heard now a bit about the gap for EPR, but our next speaker will present more details about this partnership to you. And I'm very happy to welcome Andrew Brown. He's a junior environmental policy analyst at the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development, OECD. So warm welcome to you, Andrew.
Thank you very much, Angelina. Let's see. So, good morning, everyone. Guten Morgen and bonjour. Let's see. So I have 2 parts today that I'll be speaking about. The first is to introduce the Global Action Partnership for EPR. Maybe can I just see by raise of hands if you are aware of this organization or this partnership? I see some hands coming up. That's lovely. That's great to see. And I'll just give a quick reminder for those. And for the rest of us, we'll get an introduction to this program as well. And let me just, the clicker is right here. Perfect. So just a bit of information we heard to try to describe the problem that we have in front of us that we're facing. In 2020, Nature published an article which roughly tried to estimate how much the built environment as compared to natural processes in terms of weight. And we're almost at a tipping point. It depends on whether you want to include water within biological systems, but roughly speaking, the built environment is about equal with natural systems themselves. So we're at a point, and when we talk about waste, you can see on the left side of the screen here, the projections, they were alluded to just a minute ago with the previous speaker, but we also can see here in graphic format that this is going to be a projection up to some increasing of, this is roughly times 3 compared to where we were in 2016 to 2050. This is based on data from the World Bank. On the right, we can see how are governments looking to address this issue of waste generation. And one of the major approaches that's being used is extended producer responsibility. We're going to go into more depth about that later today. But this is on the left where we were with packaging EPR, so just taking one of the major streams of what's happening with the built environment around plastics, and of course not just plastics, but all packaging. On the left, you see in 2000, there's some representation in Europe, but then we compare this to where we were roughly 1 year ago in April 2023, and it's growing in interest. So EPR for packaging, but not just for packaging, for other material streams as well, is a major approach that's being used by governments. And there's debate happening all over the world about how best to design these systems. I'm from the United States, so this is happening at a state-by-state level, as well as there was a hearing in our US Senate, so it's of interest at a domestic level in some countries. There's an implementation stage in other countries, and it's also a point of discussion in the international stage, for example, in the International Negotiating Committee for the Plastics around the Global Plastics Treaty that will be forthcoming. So there was a need to try to bring together some experts to have a discussion about what we mean by extended producer responsibility, what we know about it, where can we improve it. And this is just to tell you our mission statement, which is to think jointly ahead, and that this global action partnership, we would like to connect the practitioners and the experts that exist worldwide, and to foster a sense of collaboration and to support innovative thinking about this approach on extended producer responsibility. And then on the left here, you can see who we are. This is a partnership which includes GIZ, the Worldwide Fund for Nature, and the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development, hosted by the Prevent Waste Alliance and with collaboration from the Ellen MacArthur Foundation and from UNEP. So we've brought together some of the expertise around the world to foster collaboration and to think ahead about how this approach can be used. So this slide will tell us a bit more about who we are targeting, what's our audience for this partnership. We want this to be a tool that will help countries and at subnational level where this is appropriate to develop their EPR schemes. We also want to attract attention from companies as well. So this is our target group is the governments themselves, organizations that help to implement this. These are known as the producer responsibility organizations, as well as other stakeholders and sector representatives. And of course, we'd love to have experts from academia who can help us to inform that collaboration and identification of the best available research. So this slide will tell us a bit more about how we intend to do our mission. So we have a few points. I'm going to go a bit more in depth on the one on the bottom left on the next slide. But for now, we can say that we're looking for a common understanding of EPR. And I'll be describing one major initiative of doing that is around our forthcoming publication. But this is also supported by an extensive library. If you haven't been to our website, I invite you to do so. You can look into the library and it'll have a sort of what we've been able to identify as the peer-reviewed literature on extended producer responsibility that's related to this approach. We're also hosting public events. Angelina is often hosting these webinars where we identify experts who are in a particular stream or particular use of EPR. These are highly informative. And we also are bringing together this international community of EPR, so hosting events like we are doing today. And this is helping us to think jointly about EPR, where it can go and contribute to this international process. All right, and then we'll talk a bit more now about how we intend to provide tailored support for countries in country. So I'll give you two examples of what this means. One is targeted support for the countries. We have some initial funding which came from the Norwegian Retailers Environment Fund. My understanding is that when you purchase a plastic bag in Norway, this is a small fee which is then helping to provide for some of this money is coming to us for helping with two different country projects in country. One is Sempre, which is based in Buenos Aires, Argentina, and the other is Marea, M-A-R-E-A, in Malaysia. And so we're providing 6 months of support. What we are doing is we're identifying expertise within region and helping them to develop an EPR scheme. And on the second side of this is the help desk, which we are operating for a period of about 14 months. And so we have, this is roughly when you use our website, you can identify a need that you have for implementation of EPR or questions that you have for EPR, and we will identify expertise that can help with addressing that issue. So this is an ongoing support that we're providing. All right, and a little bit more about where we're going in this current year. So we want to extend the library. We invite all of you here today, if you have a chance, to go to the library. And we have a submission area where you can provide any papers that you have been working on that you think would be relevant for the wider community. We just talked about this technical support. I also mentioned the webinars that we're doing on a number of different topics. Just one example, going outside of plastics in particular, but looking at packaging. We also had a webinar on textiles very recently, and we had expertise from the electronic and electrical equipment world to look at how fees could possibly follow secondhand use of products when they leave a particular border. We also have contribution to international processes. Some folks here will probably be in Ottawa, Canada next week. That's another example. We will have a presence there. We're going to be hosting a side event, an official side event as well, promoting the paper that I'll talk about later. So this is an example there, and helping with sessions at trade fairs and extension of our activities to additional material streams in the coming year. So I want to pause now. I think, is it Valerie or, okay, perfect.
Thank you, Andrew, for this good introduction. And we now have time for one or two questions from the audience. So if you have any questions on the Gap for EPR, its activities, you can raise your hand. Please introduce yourself quickly. Yeah, the man over there, please.
Hi, Leonard Hosbos, Empower.eco. We're actually part of the EPR in Buenos Aires. We're the technical data layer. I was wondering, what does the vision of OECD look like with regards to technical and data aggregation platforms moving forward in global EPR?
Would you like to respond now, or shall we take a second question? Let's take a second one.
Thank you. I'm Piotr from the ASEAN Foundation, African Circular Economy Network Foundation. A question, you've chosen to support Malaysia and Argentina. On what is your methodology to choose those countries? Is it by request? And then if other requests comes, how do you take them? Thanks.
Thank you. Okay, Andrew, are you ready?
All right, thanks so much for the 2 questions. It's very nice to meet you in person. I'll come by and say hello after the event. I think this is one of the great things about these accelerator sessions is we get a chance to mix. I have some colleagues from the GAP who I've yet to meet in person, so this is a great event. Around how the OECD sees data aggregation and what can our platform do for that. The OECD Environment Directorate, which is where I work, we have something which is called PINE database, and this is sort of our flagship around hosting information in terms of quantitative information for all environmental policies. So it has a lot around revenue generation for taxes on things like climate. I will say that this is in need of some improvement for the realm of circular economy. This is something that I can see happening in the next few years around identifying the measures within our 38 member countries and beyond. But it's an excellent question and something that I think we're looking at for the future. But I would invite you to take a look at PINE as well. And on the second question, the method for the selection of the countries for this, I would like to just maybe emphasize this was a pilot project. So we had some initial funding, and the idea around this was to do a proof of concept for how we would do these sorts of technical assistance going forward. So we had a call for proposals roughly, I believe this was 8 to 10 months ago, and we received a number of applications. I believe Angelina could probably be more versed at how many in total we received, but I believe it was in the order of about 5. And we were selecting where we thought the need was best expressed. We also were looking at the long-term sustainability after our intervention, whether this could be useful long-term in country. And it doesn't hurt from my angle that Argentina is an ascension country for the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development. So there's a potential in the future where we look at the laws and regulations in place in Argentina that we could provide additional assistance through the avenues of the OECD as well. So this is just a bit of more information about how we did it. But roughly speaking, we had a call for proposals. We reviewed the proposals and we selected where we thought we could have the best impact.
Thank you for your questions, and thanks, Andrew, for answering those. We now move on to the next part of your presentation, Andrew, which is the presentation of the policy paper that will be launched in just a few moments.
All right, thank you so much. All right, so the second part of my intervention is to offer that we now have available this policy paper. The policy paper is just a term for the OECD, but this means that we are sharing something on the extended producer responsibility. And really, this is on basic facts and key principles. You have the cover image of the new paper here on the right. Who's the clicker has disappeared. I see. Thank you so much. All right. So let me just quickly try to describe the scope that we looked at for this paper. What it does do is it's going to clarify in 2 parts. We have the first is clarifying basic facts of EPR. And I'll just say the real major contribution of this paper is that we have had a wide range of reviewers, a wide range of input coming in on the development of this paper. And so what we were able to say here is almost that pillar that we talked about of the common understanding of EPR. This is where we could get a large number of stakeholders to roughly agree on messaging. So this clarifies the basic facts. We did this around a frequently asked questions mechanism. We also outlined some selected principles. I think we saw some red earlier when we asked, was EPR a success story? We chose to try to identify, rather than looking at there are some issues with EPR, how do we solve them, but instead to say, here are some good practices that we've identified in the first 30 years of the use of this approach, and maybe this could be applicable to try to address those, but we've used the emphasis of the success side of it. So this is looking at principles for successful implementation. We got this material from already existing literature on peer-reviewed international sort of text. The second thing I'd like to talk about here is what the paper doesn't do. It's not advocating for EPR implementation, and it's not providing specific text for the Intergovernmental Negotiating Committee on Plastics. This is, I mean, you can do the math. It's being released the week before INC4, so it is definitely there to be helping with the discussion next week in Ottawa, but it's not providing specific text that could be used and lifted by negotiators. So I'll just run through a couple examples of these frequently asked questions. So the first one is that what is EPR? We as a group sort of provided this definition, which largely is coming off of the OECD definition, so it's rather expansive, and that is a policy approach rather than a specific instrument that's making producers responsible for their products along the life cycle, and this is including at the post-consumer stage of the life cycle. We also break out two major forms of producer responsibility organizations when they implement as well. These are EPR schemes. You're not going to find one that's exclusively one or the other necessarily, but rather it's going to be in between the two. But the overall type is going to be a financial EPR scheme where you have the producers funding. And similarly with operational, the producers are funding the mechanism. In the financial, it's the public sector, which does the major lifting of the operating of the collection and processing. And then in operational, you have the producers themselves, which are, or who they're contracting with, their proxies, who do the major lifting. Second, frequently asked question, what is it that EPR does? What can it do? We tried to pull from the existing literature on the effectiveness and on its impacts. We see improvements in transparency around the material streams that are covered and the products that are covered. This is helping to shift the cost of public ambitions for recovery of materials from governments themselves and the municipal governments to the producers and to consumers. It's also helping to increase collection in terms of performance and increasing the recovery rates of what is being collected. We also don't want to dismiss some of what the original arguments for extended producer responsibility were. It's just that there's perhaps room for improvement here. And this, I would say, is largely fed into by a paper I wrote for the OECD around new aspects of EPR. I invite you to look at that as well. But this has information about how mitigating pollution can be done through EPR schemes, as well. How can we go back to what was originally talked about in changing design by producers of their products and focusing on design for the environment. And then, as mentioned earlier, around electrical and electronic equipment, but this is also relevant for other products, is around the geographic scope of EPR and making sure that what's being collected for the fees is actually helping to deal with management and recovery wherever that's occurring. Another frequently asked question is EPR just a tax? So I think I'm probably preaching to the choir here, as we say in America, but no, it's not a tax. EPR does often involve a fee for the producers or the brands that are implicated, but this is a fee that's paying for a service. This is a scheme that we are archetype here of a product take-back system. You can add multiple PROs if you're in a situation with competition, or you can think you could just drop the S if you're looking at a single PRO in a system. So yes, there's money moving between producers to the PROs and money moving between the PROs and the municipalities, but we're not calling this necessarily a tax. Another question, can we just simply delegate this to the producers themselves? Do we need government to have a role? So no, I mean, we look consistently, we see that the mandatory EPR, what we mean by mandatory EPR is that there's a policy requiring that this occur. It's not simply a voluntary system set up and regulated by the companies themselves, that this is done better with monitoring and enforcement. There's less free riding and a broader scope of the wastes covered. Sometimes if it's just the companies themselves, they'll pick what has the material value and leave the rest to the municipalities. In context of packaging, this could be you focus on the PET bottles, but you leave everything else. So with these mandatory systems, there's a role here for government. We think that governments can help to clearly define what is a producer. It can clearly define the obligations and the targets, and it can support the enforcement to help reduce that free riding. The paper I also mentioned has a second section, which is looking at the key principles. We chose to look at this, as I mentioned, from a success angle. And so we've drawn source material from the OECD, literature. We've also looked at the literature from the UN agencies, and in particular the BRS, so the Basel, Rotterdam, and Stockholm Conventions, and their executive secretariats. The European Union, looking at the Waste Framework Directive, Amendment 8A, and various other forms of papers. The World Wildlife Fund and the Prevent Waste Alliance are some other material sources. And we look at a number of topics, and we identify key pieces of information from the literature on the left that we keep in quotes that identify best practices around definition of responsibility, target setting, how to coordinate with stakeholders, how to be transparent, how to ensure fair competition, that you have the government capacity to be the partner that we talked about in the previous slide, and how to involve the informal sector. I'll hand it over to Angelina now. Yes.
Thank you, Andrew, for this great presentation of the content. And now, ladies and gentlemen, I'm very happy to announce that the paper is live now. And we would like to invite you to celebrate with us. You're already taking your phones, great. This is the QR code leading to the LinkedIn profile of the Prevent Waste Alliance. And there's now a post online with the link to the paper. But we would also like to invite you to answer those two questions you see here on the slide. You can comment on the post, and the questions are: which part of the policy paper is the most helpful to you? And what are the gaps still to be addressed in future research? So please feel invited to share the paper in your networks, to also repost and comment on LinkedIn. And while you do so, we again have time for one or two questions on the policy paper, on the content. We can clarify now. Is there any question? Yeah, in the back. Could you?
Could you please wait for the... Yeah, thank you. So that the online audience hears you as well.
Okay. Yeah, I'm just curious why you said specifically it's not used for advocacy of the adoption of EPR. You have such a nice paper illustrate all the good principles.
Other questions?
Mine is specifically not on the paper, but I'd just like to know, you mentioned that generally EPR is driven by policy, but is coming from the government side. Is there any example where it has been driven by private sector, maybe at a national level or even a regional level?
Thank you. Oh, sorry. Last one.
Yeah, thank you. I'm just really curious about how we kind of stimulate this sort of new economics around this. I mean, it'll have a profound effect on storing and incentives and bounties and reverse logistics and all of these sort of manner of things. Any thoughts on how budding startups can really, take advantage of this and drive the economic upshift?
Thank you very much. Over to Andrew.
All right, thank you so much for those questions. We love digitalization at the OECD, so I'd be happy if anyone wants to take a card here. This will also link directly to the paper. So please feel free after the program to take one of these cards with a QR code. So we're all very much in the 21st century with technology here. All right. So thank you for the three questions. The first one I have as, why did we not specifically include advocacy within the scope of the paper? I think that this is an excellent question, and it's one that we had in feedback from a number of reviewers as well. And my response would be to say that we wanted to, in this first paper, to say what we can know and to provide that common knowledge around what is known about EPR. I think we, as the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development, would have had a difficult time producing a paper within the context of the INC and Plastics Treaty, providing something that could possibly be misconstrued as a policy of all 38 member countries. So it was simply a matter of getting 38 member countries to agree on something is incredibly difficult, and doing this within the amount of time that we had available to us. and et cetera. So in general, I think that the point was to say this was within what we thought could be possible, and we still think that the paper itself is relevant and it provides a lot of information for negotiators, but we didn't provide specific text that could be lifted, and that's also within the context of what organizations like the OECD have as our remit. We're not negotiators as part of the Plastics Treaty. We are observers. So I think there's a possibility in future INC that there could be room for the Global Action Partnership to provide potential language if there's a movement towards knowing that we want to include EPR, but we're not sure, and we need to have maybe something like an appendix which explains what that means, that there could be a role for an organization like the Global Action Partnership to provide that technical expertise. On the second question, yeah, it's a good opportunity for me to perhaps clarify my information. So, yeah, I think that government providing policy which requires extended producer responsibility is what we are thinking of as a mandatory EPR. And at the OECD, we take a larger, more inclusive definition of EPR. So that includes the voluntary schemes, which are looking at like corporate social responsibility, and there's a canon of literature around private industry setting a organization for themselves. Just to name some examples, I mean, there are, you could look at the United Kingdom is doing something around textiles. Australia is doing something around textiles, which are led by the industry themselves. In the United States, there's not a national policy for extended producer responsibility, so there is, at the state level, there's instances where there's an EPR which is taking hold, and I think I could see a world in which private sector comes to government saying, look, we don't want to have 50 or 100 different versions of what is meant by EPR, and we'd rather have a more central definition, so that could even be private sector approaching government. I could see that happening as well. So I certainly don't want to exclude the role that private sector has to play, and I think that's almost the entire point of extended producer responsibility, is to say, look, brands, manufacturers have a special expertise and a special ability that we want to access to help us achieve our public goals around collection and recovery. And then on the third question, I have in my notes here that the question was around startups, but I'm so sorry. I might need to ask you to, see if we can get you a microphone to give me a chance to properly answer your question.
Thank you. Yeah, I think it would include the startup community, but it's the sheer impact of EPR, its impact on business and what that means for forward logistics, reverse logistics, storing, sort of digital platforms that would enable things like bounty systems to flourish, consumer-based, services to again make it easy to return and meet those EPR sort of targets. So really just some thoughts on how we, further stimulate the sort of the private sector to drive and ultimately sort of, digitize the environment. Thanks.
All right, thank you so much for repeating. I'd like to point out the OECD does have a paper which is on digitalization and circular economy, which was released a few years ago. I'd be happy to share that with you as well. That'll go more in depth than I'll be able to go into here in a response. But so how can we use available technology to make this more of a feasible system? I think one example I was reading about on the train just now on the way up to Brussels from Paris, where I live, was around the electronic and electrical equipment in India. And there was a concern around potentially how do we engage the informal sector, and could you possibly get into a world where the introduction of EPR and the producer responsibility organizations aren't necessarily improving the collection system themselves, but are rather engaging with the informal sector and buying the material from them. And there's not that there's, I mean, there's a way to do that correctly and probably a way to do it incorrectly. But yeah, I mean, to point this into example, I mean, it's a matter of how do we identify what we want to occur, how do we verify it, and doing an audit. An audit is only a snapshot of what's happening, so using digital technologies will allow us to get better information and improve the transparency, which we list as the first point of what an EPR can do, is to improve that transparency. So yeah, I think we need to be creative, we need to look at what digital technologies are available and to utilize them where possible. And to get into specific applications, I would suggest to take a look at this report, and I'd be happy to share it with you.
Great, thank you for your questions. I'm sorry, we don't have time to take more. Thank you, Andrew, for your comprehensive answers. And I'm closing this part of the event now, so give a warm applause for Andrew, thank you. And now handing over to Valerie for the panel discussion.
Thank you, Angelina. Thank you, Andrew. We're very lucky today that we have 4 speakers from around the world, which I'd like to welcome with us on stage now. Starting with Anna Suryana from the Indonesian Ministry of Environment and Forestry. Welcome. Please take your seat. Anna is an environmental policy advisor at the ministry. She develops policy and regulation relating to waste, but she also delivers capacity building and training. We also have, from Colombia, Ruben Goldstein here. Welcome. Ruben is from ANDI. And ANDI is the National Business Association of Colombia. Ruben, as such, leads 7 programs, I believe, under EPR. And he also leads all the work on circular economy and climate at ANDI. Next up, welcoming not very far from Belgium, Thomas de Meester. Welcome, from FOST Plus, which is the PRO, yes. The PRO for household packaging, where Thomas is the Public Affairs and Regulatory Affairs Manager. And finally, welcome to Eduardo Bodo from Reuse. And I'll have a seat as well. And Eduardo represents Reuse, which is the European association representing social enterprises active in reuse, repair, and recycling. Great. I will start with you, Anna. We would love to hear about your experience coming from Indonesia as a policymaker from Indonesia. Can you tell us what are the challenges you experienced with the implementation of EPR? And do you have any advice for us on how to overcome those challenges?
Yeah, okay, thank you. Thank you for having me. It's such an honor to me to be part of this event. I'm Anna from the Ministry of Environment and Forestry, Republic of Indonesia. Yeah. Before I answer your question, maybe a little bit tell you about the journey of the implementation EPR in Indonesia. As of 2019, Indonesia has implemented the EPR through the ministerial regulation number 75/2019 on the producer waste reduction roadmap. And the principle of this regulation is that encourage to the development of innovative process for the manufacture and then distribution of the product through 3R approach, reduce, reuse, recycle. We targeted on the 3 sectors of the producer, which are manufacturing, food and beverage, and the service. And then we have the targeted on the EPR regulation in 2029, but 30% of reduction waste from the producer, and also we have target to phase out some kind of waste, such as styrofoam from the packaging, food packaging, and straw, and then also the cutlery. But the journey of the implementation in Indonesia is not easy, yeah, because we have some challenges to implement in Indonesia. For example, the regulation itself is the scope of regulation is the ministerial level. So we need to more higher level to make stronger the regulation, and then we can involve other government institution and also to force the producer to implement it, the regulation, since that most of the waste coming from the producer itself. And then another challenge is that we do not have the threshold, the threshold in the use of product packaging weight for the producer. So without the threshold, the target producer is too wide, and then in the future we have to make the threshold product of weight of the packaging weight to make more focused on the main target of the producer. Probably we currently we more focus on the national and multinational producer, and then after that follow with the small and medium producer. The third one, we still have more homework to implementing the EPR mechanism in Indonesia, is that there is no mandate to establish the PROs. The PRO, whose role to collect and manage the EPR. This is important to help us to market share across Indonesia. And then the another thing is that how to setting up the effective law enforcement mechanism for the complying the rules, since currently there is no sanction or penalty yet for the implementation for the producer. And another challenge, but also the opportunity, is that the existing of the informal sector in Indonesia. About 80% value chain of plastic recycling is belong to from the informal sectors. This is the big opportunity, but we still have homework, since we don't have any specific regulation for the informal sector, and then we also have facing the negative stigma in the society for the informal sectors. But yeah, we as a government, we encourage them to linkage them to the recycling industry and etc. And then we also have the what's called social capital. We call it the waste bank. Waste bank is the one of waste collection facility that owned and operate by the community. This is important because that through the waste bank, the community should separate their waste from their host, and then they can sell the waste to the waste bank, and the waste bank can sell it again, the waste, to the recycling industry. This is like a value chains and a big opportunity, because we have a quite big for the waste bank, more than 16,000 across Indonesia. And also we also have the startup waste management technology. This is also the big opportunity for us, especially targeted to the young generation, to more aware about the waste issue. Yeah. Yeah, I think that's all for me. Thank you.
That was very comprehensive already. Thank you so much. I'm asking you to move the microphone to Thomas here. And with Thomas, I'd like to come back to the cards we saw earlier, with a bit of a mixed response on whether EPR is or can be considered a success story. From your experience being fairly established, if I may say so, in Belgium, but also on the EU level, what is your view? Is EPR a success story, and where are the areas for improvement?
So, first of all, I was very happy to see a lot of green cards as well. A couple of red cards, a couple of mixed green and red. But I think I can note two things. First of all, there's always room for improvement. Second of all, a lot depends on the design of the EPR scheme. We don't see EPR as a purely financial obligation. EPR is not business as usual. It should activate the right levers and incentivize the obliged industry to continuously improve. They should be actively involved in the design. So we do believe that operational involvement of EPR schemes is required, among others, for the implementation of upstream measures. And as PROs, we have a couple of tools in our toolbox. I will share a couple of the Belgian best practices, but I'm sure they will be implemented in other countries around the globe as well. So first of all, we're actively working together with the industry on design for recycling. We have a full team dedicated to design for recycling, looking together with our 4,800 members on how to improve the design of their packaging, increase the compatibility with our sorting and recycling facilities. We do that through tailor-made advice on the one hand, but also by looking at alternatives without packaging or with reusable packaging, which is important to note as well, as we see on a regulatory level, especially in the EU, reuse and prevention will be a very important topic in the coming years. So this is already something that we're currently working on. There was also a pledge by the Belgian industry to have all packaging recyclable or reusable in 2025 or by 2025. So we're actively working on that, and we're currently identifying that around 2% or a little bit less than 2% of the packaging on our market is still non-recyclable. So we do still have some work to do in the coming years, but we're working very hard to get this percentage to 0. Another tool in our toolbox is the eco-modulation of fees. And here in Belgium, we have a rather unique approach since the fees for our members are based on the actual net costs of the collection, sorting, and recycling. Then if we're looking at indirect costs, such as communication measures, awareness raising measures, etc., they are also allocated through an allocation key to a fee per material. So that's quite an innovative and unique approach, which helps, again, incentivize producers to improve the recyclability of their packaging. I think it's also important to note that this coincides with a very strong legal framework. This is for us also indispensable. We have had a framework at the EU level in place since 1994 already. But at the Belgian level, we also have specific targets. And those targets are often even more ambitious than what Europe is proposing. For example, we had to achieve a 65% plastic packaging recycling rate compared to the packaging put on the market by our members. And in order to do that, we also had to work downstream. We had to think on how to improve this plastics recycling rate. And us as a PRO, having an operational responsibility as well, we could really design and optimize our system to take care of this additional plastic packaging. So what we did was we expanded the sorting message of, some of you might know it, those who are not from Brussels probably not, the blue bag, which collects plastic, metal, and drinks packaging. But before, it was only collecting plastic bottles and flasks. We've expanded the sorting message to all plastic packaging, but that also created the need for investment in new specific sorting centers to handle these new types of plastic packaging, as well as we went to look for recyclers for those streams where it made financially and economically where it was feasible to invest in local recycling capacity. We managed to attract private investments in these new sorting centers, in these new recycling centers, and thus establishing Belgium as a European recycling hub. So maybe as a conclusion, I would say that EPR can be a success story, but it needs the right conditions, the right factors, and the right design. And I think Belgium and the way we've implemented it in here is a good example of a success story. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'm taking from this a strong vision focused on prevention and reuse, but also perhaps a preference for a financial and organizational responsibility, not merely financial. Thank you, Thomas. Over to you, Ruben. We heard a bit from Anna about the informal sector, which is also present in Colombia. On a general level, what are your recommendations for EPR policy design when it comes to the integration of the informal sector, including in operations like reuse and repair, perhaps?
Well, thank you for the question. Hi, everyone. Pretty glad to be here. Well, I'm going to talk about a bit of ANDI, of the National Business Association. There are in Colombia 11 programs under regulation for EPR, in which this is a blend of mandatory and voluntary actions, but most of the programs, let's say under the umbrella of ANDI, they work as they were all mandatory, right, with the specific targets, but I'm going to focus on packaging. Well, in terms of how do we involve informal sector waste pickers, this is pretty much one of the priorities. They are seen as an allies and partners, and this is related to the fair share and how do you provide and distribute the benefits along the value chain, specifically in terms of upstream activities. Normally, EPR is considered and has a heavy focus on downstream activities, but regardless of what we do as a PRO from the private sector, let's say more than 350 companies, more than 24 sectors, the idea is that you have to involve them in the decision-making process. One of the key elements is that across eco-modulation schemes and around specific interventions and consultations with them in terms of market transformation, potential sorting, collection, and consumer behavior, then we can design and tailor-make the specific decisions from the program. And then, of course, the idea is that this will depend on the producer fees, and then, of course, we adjust how do we operate in terms of involve, to the final linkages of the value chain, and also in terms of how do we provide geographic coverage across Colombia. I don't know if you've been in Colombia, but it's pretty difficult to reach certain areas. These are isolated and remote locations without any infrastructure, any specific roads or highways. So it is very, very expensive to reach a specific area, let's say in the Amazon, for instance. So for us, this is really one of the biggest challenges as well. Now, of course, you have to, reach specific areas, and of course, as part of the regulation, either you reach certain specific geographic locations, either in geographic coverage, or you have to invest in a specific activities, focus on upstream, mainly innovation and eco-design. So this is part of the multi-criteria regulation for sustainable packaging and plastics. And for us, as a program, we don't see this as the silver bullet, rather than just a circular economic strategy that we have to reach both areas, upstream and downstream. Otherwise, it is really difficult to reach and close the loop. And that is why, of course, upstream and downstream activities, we see this as a whole, rather than to just focus on, within the PROs, on the downstream activities.
Perfect, thank you so much. Moving on to Eduardo then, coming from the European perspective and the social enterprise perspective. Maybe looking back rather than looking forward, what is your assessment of the European track record of EPR? What has EPR really delivered for social enterprises in Europe?
Well, thank you for your question, for the invitation in general. I have to say not much, unfortunately. And this is not actually something against EPR, quite the opposite. It's the fact that we could do so much more with EPR if we didn't just focus on recycling. We should do much more also on reuse, repair, on prevention aspect, because the idea of EPR is the environmental, the extended producer responsibility, but about the environmental stages. We know that the important things are in prevention, in design. We have this tool called the waste hierarchy. We have alternative business models, reuse, repair, yet we still only focus on recycling. This is not NGOs saying this is official EU sources as well. And it's a missed opportunity. We represent, for instance, social enterprises active in the reuse and repair of goods. In the most simple definition I can give you, a social enterprise is an enterprise that puts environmental and social consideration above profits. This can take a lot of forms. Usually, there's always some form of democratic governance, and in a lot of cases, they also work with people distant from the labor market. So this can be people with physical or mental disabilities, this can be refugees, people that for whatever reason are excluded in a way. So we like to say we give a second chance to both people and items this way. Yet, our members work, well, it's a big sector, the social economy. I may add, it's about 8% of the EU's GDP, 2.8 million individual social enterprises, not all of whom work on circular economy, but there are quite a bit who do. And yet, often they're completely excluded from EPR, both from the governance, meaning how EPRs are set up, but also from the daily functioning. And what I'm referring to is the waste access. A lot of our members do not access waste. For instance, talking about electronics here, because e-waste was also mentioned, I think. Electronics, we know that 1/3 to almost half of all electronics sent for recycling could easily be repaired. Sometimes they work. They just simply work, but no one bothers to check and turn them on. So we destroy them instead of reusing them and giving them a new life. We think this is an issue. And so this is why we think we could do so much more. We are seeing some encouraging developments in legislation right now. There is this Waste Framework Directive, as you know, focusing on textiles mostly, and food waste. In the previous revision, the term social economy was mentioned twice. In the current proposal, it was mentioned 11 times. And in the report voted by the Parliament, this got up to 17. So from 2 to 17, it's an improvement. We are seeing that the role of social enterprises is being recognized, which is good, but now we want to see proper implementation, and we hope this can also be extended to other areas, because we really think we can do so much more than just recycling.
And I'll stay with you for my next round of questions. When you say we can do so much more, we actually have European elections coming up. Do you see that fitting under the existing Waste Framework Directive mainly? Do you see a need for new regulations or pieces of legislation to be established? What should happen exactly? What is your wish for the future?
Sure. In more general terms, we'd like the social and the green and the social and the circular economy to be on top of the EU agenda, to be considered, ideally not in silos, ideally together, because it's mutually reinforcing the social, the circular economy. More specifically, there is this directive on WE, which is happening, WE meaning e-waste. And there, we really would like to see some more improvements regarding increasing reuse rates and giving more equitable access to social enterprises and other stakeholders. So, in a nutshell, yeah, this is what I would advocate.
Very clear. Thank you so much. I'll stay in Europe for now and move on to Thomas. Thomas, you mentioned the pledge made by the Belgian industry with a very short deadline, 25, which is around the corner, but you also mentioned that you made solid progress to achieving that target. Is that the role that you see for industry, being a front runner and in that way shaping ambitious EPR policy, EPR targets as well? How do you see this dynamic playing out in the future in Belgium, in Europe, and perhaps even globally?
I think that is indeed... Sorry. I think that's indeed the role EPR systems have to play in the near future. And we're at a key moment in time now for PROs, for EPR systems, looking at this new European legislation, the packaging and packaging waste regulation, which is not formally adopted yet, but in its final phases. It's quite a groundbreaking legislation since it introduces for the first time waste prevention targets, waste reduction targets, and reuse targets. And I think we as PROs, we have a very privileged role. We are a central actor in a quite complex web of different stakeholders, but it's also privileged since we have an overview of the full market. And I do believe and think that we as PROs should evolve and take up a role in this domain as well. So that is my wish, that we as PROs will, in the next coming years, be able to adapt and play our role in these domains as well.
Thank you. Ruben, you mentioned Andy has mixed programs, so both voluntary and mandatory EPR schemes. How do you see that moving forward? Is it going towards mandatory? Is it being expanded to other sectors in Colombia? Where do you see it going, or where would you like to see EPR in Colombia going?
Well, from these programs, let's say for example, for the packaging one, it started already in 2021, so this is not so old. It started as a voluntary PRO in 2019, so it's been a while, but not as long as you could use this experience and the implementation experience also to establish certain criteria, although we are highly ambitious in terms of targets, in terms of cooperation alliances. and how do we see ourselves, not only in the Latin American framework as one of the lighthouses for some, let's say, some examples and leading examples from PROs in different countries, and of course we try to, to do more. The idea is we need some more time to be on the implementation phase, to learning by doing, and also to improve, let's say, our operation with some other actors in the process, with informal sectors, try to amplify this coverage, provide more inputs and benefits across the value chain. So I think this is rather important. Some PROs, they have here in Europe more than 30 years already operating. So yeah, it's such a short term, and one of the key challenges also is not to touch the regulation currently that is under discussion with the single plastics, and also in Colombia they want to, let's say, open this regulation. So we see this as generates normally uncertainties and confusion across the different linkages across the value chain, and so this is rather difficult. So we prefer to maintain this status quo, keep up, provide and make the program more robust in terms of operation. Of course, in terms of the INC4, as a non-state entity, we provide also certain input to the government, and also to take and use EPR programs experiences according to, take into account national circumstances and capabilities, and of course this is rather different in Colombia or Latin American countries to some were similar also in Southeast Asia or in some African countries, but in terms of comparison with some other ones in the developed countries, then this is rather different.
Very interesting. So you're saying solidify, implement, don't try to do everything at once?
Yeah, exactly. To make the program more robust and to have more experience, just to learning by doing.
Perfect. Anna, do you have a similar perspective on the future of EPR in Indonesia, and what is your personal wish for that?
Yeah.
What would you like to see happening over the coming months and years?
To implement the EPR system in Indonesia context, I think that we need more supporting and contributing each of the stakeholder, because that implementing the EPR need from the upstream level until the downstream level. It means that not only for the producer itself, but also from the community, from the local government, from the central government need more contribute to conduct the EPR system. Actually, Indonesia have a set regulation, have a target, but need more make a good value chains, and then also links between them to run well the EPR mechanism in Indonesia. Thank you.
Okay, very clear. We now have some time for questions from the audience, and I think Angelina will be going around with this microphone.
Hi, this is Siddharth from Öko Institute in Germany. So I have a question for Eduardo and also for Thomas. So what's your take on the approach followed by France within the context of the Solidarity Fund or the Fund for Change in terms of promoting, using the part of the EPR fees to finance repairs and reuse businesses, and especially against the fact that the whole concept of eco-modulated fees has not really led to the reduction of waste in total?
Yeah, I'm quite in favor. I think it's important because these exports, if they will end up in third countries, then the people dealing with them should receive support to manage them, just as we ask that our members in Europe who have to deal with quantities of waste will also do it. I would still prioritize proximity principle and the waste hierarchy by promoting by making products more durable in the first place, by putting local reuse first. But indeed, in the end, if someone has to deal with the products, the EPR should cover the cost for that product, whether it's in Europe or beyond. So I would agree. Yeah.
I'm not sure that whether I would fully agree with the fact that eco-modulation hasn't led to any results. So first of all, I gave the Belgian example where it did lead to increased recyclability of packaging, but also it does incentivize reusable packaging as well, since currently in our scheme we have a zero fee for reusable packaging, which should further incentivize producers to also make the change towards reusable packaging. At least it not hinders them. With regards to the first part of your question, the Solidarity Fund, we have in Belgium a similar obligation in our new accreditation, which also requires us and our members to invest a certain amount of the EPR fees in reusable packaging initiatives. So I can say that it's already a reality in Belgium as well.
Hi, thank you. Jan Jordan from RWTH Aachen University, also Germany. We are active in a number of European initiatives and also internationally. And there are several tools that are being developed on guiding stakeholders of different kinds towards circularity, so that people understand what schemes are there, what partner networks could be of interest for manufacturers, for innovators, but also for recyclers and so on. Now such platforms are funded over a period of 3 to 5 years or so, and then the funding stops, and then the platform or the tool is suddenly sleeping, not operated anymore. At least this is what we saw at some examples from the construction industry. Would PROs have an interest to contribute financially to operating it? Because we, in our consortium, and we have in one project 70% of the textile, of the floor covering industry represented, they say, yeah, okay, we could benefit, but there are so many others that also would need to take a share of financing such a tool that contributes to facilitation of circularity and maintaining EPR schemes. What can be done, or are there best practice examples where where such a platform suddenly really continued over the first funding period?
I'm not 100% familiar with the types of platforms you're referring to, but I do know that we as FOS Plus are also a member of a European alliance advocating for extended producer responsibility called EXPRA, and we have a large network of international members as well, which we offer support, we exchange best practices, etc. And I'm quite sure that any other system looking to develop would be more than welcome to write to us and to benefit from our guidance and exchange on best practices. Yeah, exactly. So I give the floor to you now.
Yeah. Also, as an EXPRA member, well, the PRO is one of the only countries in South America, also one in Chile, in which belongs to EXPRA, and we find these collaborations as quite effective in terms of exchange collaborations and of course across the different industries. So it is highly beneficial for us. Also, we have another collaboration with PACNet in Spain, also in terms of collaborating and know exactly what is happening in Europe, as a leading example, and also to establish again certain criteria. And being ambitious is something that if we don't have ambitious targets, then we don't find the reason to exist and to operate. Otherwise, it is without any ambition, then of course, how can you implement it like a high tailor-made program? So we the best program in Colombia. There are more than 200 PROs in Colombia, just specifically packaging. So that is highly, highly difficult. And of course, you have to differentiate from your activities. And of course, in terms how you distribute the benefits, how do you pay, and you are involved with informal sector is crucial. Otherwise, there is no. One of the key challenges also is closing the gap, especially for the waste pickers, and of course, bridging this gap is rather difficult. So this is something that we highly appreciate.
Hi, this is Jet from Tomra, China. I have a question to Anna and maybe also to Ruben. Anna, you mentioned that the informal collection system existing in Indonesia, you see it as an opportunity. But in many countries, even in Southeast Asia, in China, we see many times they can also be a bottleneck because they have such a system and they only want to pick the high-value recyclables and leave the rest out. So could you elaborate how do you see it as an opportunity to implement the EPR system in Indonesia?
Yeah, I mean that the opportunity is that the existing of informal sectors is the numbers of the informal sectors, especially waste picker, is quite high in Indonesia. But we still have the homework of the existing of them because, as I said before, that there is no specific regulation of the informal sectors, and then also the negative stigma in the society. So maybe we can. We just make the identification each of the actor or institution that can supporting them because this is the opportunity to us since they can supply recycle raw material recycle raw material from them. I mean that this is the big opportunity, but we still have the homework of them.
So you actually mean? Oh, sorry. So you actually mean that you see it's an opportunity from the government side to improve them, to include that in the EPR system, right?
Yeah.
Okay, that's clear. Thank you.
If I may be so bold to build on that question, we've actually recently proposed a solution to an EPR in Indonesia, and the feedback. And I'm Dutch, so apologies for the perceived rudeness. I'm just trying to clarify things, but the lack of financial support around these types of projects is, quite frankly, baffling. I'll be very straight. We proposed a proposal with an operational cost for a digital platform, which includes blockchain, complete data traceability, at 25,000 euros for an annual year of production, for an annual year of operation. We were told this is too expensive. Frankly, I can't even hire a student helper for a year in my markets. Right? So I'm wondering, how is the sentiment in this room, specifically for the people on the panel, how we can actually improve this? Because we talk about sustainability, but financial sustainability has to be a cornerstone in operations.
Okay. Oh yeah, maybe you can.
I would love your response, Adam.
Okay. Maybe we can. Yeah. Yeah, in Indonesia, we realized that the financial the budgeting of the waste or the waste management is still like. So as the government, we realized and then we starting to make the meeting with the other institution that related to the budgeting on the waste, and then we still doing it to make this decision, right decision on the waste budgeting. Yeah, because we realized that each city in Indonesia no more than 2% for the waste budgeting, and then yeah, we have to make the decision. Decision to and then supporting with the with the other institution, and maybe a collaboration with the NGO or the bilateral cooperation. Thank you.
Yeah, in terms from the government, normally we structure the program using like a very robust MRV system. So in terms of traceability and in terms of how do you audit the process, not only with the government itself, but rather with an external party, let's say any big four companies, because this is something that we also appreciate for transparency, and especially again with the how do you distribute the benefits to the different value chain sectors. So I think this is very, very important. Also, we for the sustainability of the program, of course, we look for external resources, and of course, again, some of the programs that we cooperate with the GIZ, not only for packaging, also for textiles that we are structuring and nowadays as one of the EPR, hopefully in the next 2 years. But for some of the waste streams as well, this is highly important, and I think you are right, they are quite expensive, but I guess in the latest years, I guess the price has been, I think they are more affordable right now than it was used to be a few years ago. So I guess there is an open data platform. Of course, we provide this information because this is highly granular data, and we provide this information also with the government, you know, just to use it, and just for all the stakeholders in the country as well, and worldwide, also for extra members and also for some other users.
I realize you have more questions, but I'm afraid we're running out of time, so I encourage you to grab one of these panelists directly after the event and ask your question. So for now, thank you very much to Anna, Ruben, Thomas, and Eduardo. Thank you for joining us. And back to you.
Thank you for these great insights, and I hope you enjoyed the panel as much as I did. Before coming to our last speaker, I would like to get again a feeling for the mood in the room here. So please grab your green and your red card one last time. For the question, yeah, perfect. Are you hopeful that EPR will contribute to more upstream measures in the future? Wow, nice. Many green cards. That makes me really hopeful. Thank you for your feedback. So now I'm really curious to hear what our next and last speaker thinks about the future of EPR, and I'm really happy to announce on the stage Homba Kasi-Blue. She's the Director for Waste Minimization and Circular Economy at the Department of Forestry, Fisheries and the Environment of South Africa. The floor is yours, Homba.
Good, is it still morning? Or? Okay, just 5 minutes to midday. So good morning, everyone in the room and everyone who has joined online. Thank you, Angelina, and thank you, Valerie. Very insightful and exciting conversations as we look at various pathways for accelerating EPR worldwide as part of our transitions to circular economy or circularity. It is indeed an honor, and I'm truly humbled to have been part of this experience. Congratulations to the Global Action Partnership on the development and the launch of your policy paper on EPR, which I believe it lays a good foundation for a shared understanding of EPR, and as well as the potential it holds for advancing circularity. This achievement is indeed setting a stage for global efforts towards sustainable practices, offering valuable lessons for all of us. So as we have heard from Lars as part of his opening remarks, that globally we are witnessing the triple planetary crisis, highlighting the urgent need for innovative and sustainable solutions to end pollution. EPR, therefore, is one of the critical instruments that promote waste reduction and product redesign to ensure that there is increased repairability, reusability, as well as or recyclability. It also propels us towards a more circular economy whilst addressing the pollution crisis. So if we look at EPR as a policy, as we've heard today from the panel discussions, many countries have adopted and embraced EPR. We've seen also by the show of many green cards that governments are taking this as a policy instrument to create an enabling environment and to ensure sustainable production. So countries, they do vary in terms of their context and circumstances, and this is also very critical in the adoption of EPR. If you look at South Africa, where I come from, it is a developing country within the African continent, and we have the packaging industry as one of the main drivers of economic growth in the country. And South African government, in collaboration with industry, is embracing circularity, and recently we have also introduced EPR regulation, and we have a scheme for paper and packaging. We also have an EPR scheme for electrical and electronic waste, lighting, which then it is a significant shift from the previous voluntary schemes. And currently in South Africa, we are working on EPR schemes for other problematic waste streams, such as the pesticides, lubricant oil, and portable batteries. So for us, the key elements of the EPR regulation as part of the requirements is the issue of transformation throughout the value chain, as well as the integration of the waste pickers from the informal sector, as well as the adoption of circular economy approaches. If we then look at the future of EPR around the globe, indeed, the world is evolving. There is a lot of discussion, as we've also heard from today, on pollution from packaging, and in particular plastics. And if we look at the regional and global levels, we have in Africa, the Africa Circular Economy Alliance, and at a global level, we have the Global Alliance for Circular Economy and Resource Efficiency, which are platforms that promote circular economy agenda. And it's also a government coalition on promoting CE. So these platforms have invested a lot in policy discussions around packaging as a stream. And within the ACA, the Africa Circular Economy Alliance, we had launched the 5 big bets for Africa's path to circularity, and packaging was identified as one of the areas for immediate opportunities for economic growth, job creation, and improvements in the environment. Within the CACERE, at a global level, they have been very much involved in following the ongoing plastic treaty negotiations emanating from the UNEP 5/14 resolution to end plastic pollution through the development of an international legally binding instrument. And a policy brief was then developed by CACERE as a knowledge product to the government member countries that are part of the CACERE to contribute to the upcoming 4th session of the INC to be held in Canada next week. And it was launched on Monday during the WCEF workshop on scaling up circular designs and plastic products. And looking again into the future of EPR around the globe, INC, therefore, with the international legal binding instrument, we see this as a key milestone for progressive action within circular economy approaches in its center or at its center, at the local, regional, and global levels, to ultimately end plastic pollution and to enhance our understanding of its global environmental impacts. The future of EPR, therefore, and circularity globally, in my view, is therefore very promising and is definitely on a good trajectory. It can also be achieved by taking into consideration national circumstances, as I've mentioned, and also if it ensures that there is a just transition whilst contributing towards the UN's SDGs, specifically the one on sustainable production and consumption. Thank you very much.